In this video, let's look at how can we work with JSON payloads in WSO2 Micro Integrator. Particularly, we will be looking at JSON to XML and XML to JSON transformations and nuances related to that. So basically, converting a JSON to XML and XML to JSON is a pretty easy task in WSO2 Micro Integrator. But when it comes to certain manipulations, for example, when you want to convert an XML to JSON, there are certain things that we need to be little careful about when you do the conversion to meet your requirements. So we'll look at all those things, and these are the two documentation links that you need to know about or refer to when it comes to XML to JSON and JSON to XML conversion from within WSO2 Micro Integrator. So I'll put the link to these documentation in the description section below later. So to get started, I'm going to use the Visual Studio code editor that we have for the Micro Integrator. For example, if you just go in there, you will look into the Micro Integrator Visual Studio Code. If you have not installed this extension, you can go to the extension section and search for Micro Integrator, and you will see this one from WSO2. You can just go and install there. And if you want to know what are the new functionalities that WSO2 has on this particular plugin, I have done a previous video on this, and I highly recommend that you follow that one as well. However, if you don't want to use this thing, you can still follow along with WSO2's Integration Studio IDE that was available for many years from WSO2 to develop this as well. However, I'm not going to show you the screenshots and recordings based on that. Okay, so with this, let's go ahead and click on this, and I want to create a new project here, and I'm gonna say JSON manipulation and so forth. You can use any name that you like. I'm gonna select a location for these. I'm gonna say for example, go to document section, maybe JSON sample. Under that, I'm going to create this and click create, and so this will create my project structure. You can use the generative AI along with GitHub Copilot to create your artifacts for Micro Integrator. That is one of the crucial things that WSO2 Micro Integrator has integrated with the Visual Studio Code plugin, as opposed to the old integration studio, right? So let's I'm not going to utilize this. If you want to know how to do that thing, look at my previous video. I'm going to create an API actually. So let's call it a JSON sample API, and I'll just say JSON test context, and click create. So this should create a get resource, and you can just double click this one to see what are the resources that are available. So you can also edit this section, and you can change your resource type if you would like. So I'm going to change this to post and URL template type, because I'm going to send a post request in this particular resource. And so for example, again, if you just click on this, the URI template also, I can change it to something meaningful, maybe payload. Okay, I'll just put it that way, and now you have that. And so if you go to this section, you will see JSON text is my API context, and the URI template for this particular resource is payload. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send initially a JSON payload to this particular request, and I'm going to convert that to XML, first handling the JSON to XML. So this section describes the details of that, so I'm going to just use this. So how do I do that thing? So how to convert a JSON to XML, assuming that you're going to get a JSON payload here. So to do that thing is a pretty easy task in WSO2 Micro Integrator. You just have to add a property mediator, and that property mediator should have a name called message type. The message type and the property value should just be application XML, and that's all you have to do. And also the scope is necessary. It has to be in the axis to scope. You can add a description, all that is fine. So when you do that thing, if you look at the code, this is what gets added: the message type, axis 2, type is string, and the value is application XML. And then I want to add a return statement or the respond thing here, a respond mediator to respond. As you can see, the respond got added, and that's it. So this is all I want to do. And to run this thing, you click this run button. When you do this for the first time, it's gonna ask you for the location or the home folder for the micro integrator. I have already done that thing, so you will see the micro integrator starting up here. As you can see, first it will build the project, and then it's gonna start my micro integrator eventually. So let's go see that. There you go. And it's now displaying. Now if you go back to the output, you will see my location, the deployed location for this one is this. No, the main location for the micro integrator is this, and it's going to deploy it there. Right now my API is already available, so I can try it out from here itself. Yeah, let's do that thing first maybe and try this. And the sample payload, of course, this has to be a JSON. If you just do something like this, the XML should come like this. So let's send a very simple JSON here. I'm gonna say maybe test string, and when you do that thing, it's gonna come back saying this one. So as you can see, it gets wrapped inside a JSON object tag, and my test and the value string comes in there. So you can put whatever value that you like. Let me put another one. Let's say amount. I'll just say this is a test string. Amount, I'll just say 42. So this is it has to be a valid JSON, otherwise it's gonna throw an error. As you can see, it comes with the details. Now let's go into the nuances. Now what if your object is an empty object? Let's see that thing as well. So let's go back and add something like file object. So you're supposed to send something, but you're not sending anything. It's an empty object. Once you do that thing, you see it comes in as an empty file tag here. So here in this case, it can be anything like this. It's just a single tag entry. And what if it is an empty string? Again, it's gonna be like that. So there is no way to differentiate that one as well. And arrays, you have other things in JSON object like arrays. For example, let's find out one more thing. I'll just put it like content. Content is empty, and maybe something like file sizes, and I will add an array for this, something like this. So let's send this thing and see what's the response that you are getting. See, the content is also empty, and the file sizes, it's an array, and now it is coming as a flat, multiple tags, and that's how it works with the JSON to XML transformation. But if you can also have anonymous arrays. You see in Micro Integrator there are different types of builders. I'm not going to show everything. I think by default the stream builder is what is enabled. So empty arrays, if it's an anonymous array, it's going to wrap it inside a JSON array object. So what do I mean by an anonymous array is like things like, for example, if I just keep this thing, delete everything, this is a perfectly valid JSON, and if you send this thing, see, it's gonna come in as JSON array, and under that you're gonna have something called JSON element, and that's what you see here, right? It's gonna have it in such a way. Fine. So but in different other builders you might get it in a different way. For example, if you use the JSON builder, a message builder within Micro Integrator, I'm not going to show you that. It's a configuration that you need to make in the deployment.toml. When you do that thing, you might sometimes have these kind of processing instructions to tell that what follows is part of a JSON array element, right? So however, that is not required always, and if your client application is smart enough and knows how the JSON payloads work, and it works along with the JSON schema, things like that, you basically don't need processing instructions to be embedded within your XML, right? And so there are other special characters as well. For example, you can have a $sign to refer to various areas within JSON, and how that works is like if you change it, it's gonna embed special values for your tag. For example, let's go back to our previous case here. I'm gonna go back to what we had previously, and let's say I'm gonna have something called $key and 1, 2, 3, and let's execute this. And as you can see, it's gonna have like this particular thing prepended to your tag element, and that's what it's gonna do. And so these are the things that you need to be a little aware about. And also when you have spaces, now in JSON, keys can have spaces, but in XML you can't, tags can't have spaces. So how does that gets handled here? Let's say I'm going to say space object, something like this, and let's go fire it. And then what's going to happen is, you see this space object, and in between you're going to have JSON reader _32. So this 32 symbolizes the space size in bytes, not in bytes, in bits actually. So it's 4 bytes actually. This is what represented there. And so these are the things that you need to know when it comes to JSON to XML conversion and so forth. This works other way around as well. Like if you have if you want to do XML to JSON conversion and your XML tag has these values, it will be interpreted as a space, and for $sign and things like that. Fine. So I think JSON to XML is pretty straightforward. However, now when it comes to XML to JSON, there are a few more things that you need to be aware about, and that's what we're going to check next. So let's do a simple XML to JSON conversion, and it's pretty easy. You guessed how you do that thing. and I'm going to stop this thing, and like, you just don't have to do anything. Like, assuming that you're going to get an XML and you want to change to JSON, only thing that you want to do is make it JSON and change the message type property to JSON under the property access to scope. So if you just go back here and you see this value, fine. So I also have some details here, and I have this postman to send some request. I have some sample XML, so I'll come back to that. So let's run our code here. So it's gonna rebuild and eventually run, and my endpoint is HTTP localhost 290. You can do it here itself, that's also fine, but I'm gonna use postman 8290, and I want to use JSON test, and my context is JSON test, and I have this payload, right? So let's execute this, and I should see something coming up. Right, so what happened? I think it didn't convert back to JSON. There's something that is missing. Let's see. So going back to my message type, right, I think something hasn't changed. So I need to make this to JSON. It has to get saved. I think I haven't saved it. So just stopping the, so once you make the change, you have to click submit. Haven't done that previously. So now we have this value JSON changed. Let's run it again. And once you have it running, let me run this. So when you do this thing, you see I have wrapped my XML into a JSON object, obviously that I need to do. And that's how WSO2 Micro Integrator will recognize this as a JSON. And books, you have a single element here, but in that single element is wrapped inside an object, and then you have this book element, and book element has two properties, name and quantity, and this is rightfully converted to a number, and total is also rightfully converted to a number. So there are few nuances that's related, like what if I have multiple books here? So if I just do something like this, let me say and I have 70, okay, whatever that number, that's fine. And you see in this case it became an array. Obviously should be, because there are multiple elements under the books, and you know, now the book element is an array. Now when I had only one, you saw that it was a single object. But what if your requirement is, even in that case, that you are expecting multiple books here, but you know, you happen to only retrieve one book, but in certain circumstances you will probably, most of the time you will have multiple books, and you still want that books object to contain you know, the book objects to contain multiple arrays. How do you tackle that? You know, there are ways to do that thing in WSO2, and let's go understand that a little bit here. Fine, so to do that thing, you might have to instruct, for example, that certain object needs to be an array, and so forth, right? And one other thing, for example, like what if you want this value to be a string instead of a number? Yes, in this case it makes sense to have a number, but you want to have it as a string, and by default it doesn't do that. So one way to do that is there is something called a synapse properties in you know, WSO2's configuration files. you can use that, but that will apply it globally. For example, I'm going to open up that file now. For example, I'm just going to use file open and go to my JSON sample. No, I want to open my this particular location. For example, I'm going to open project files, WSO2 Micro Integrator VSCode, this one, and you go to the conf directory, you have something called Synapse properties. So this file I want to open, and you see a number of things there, and you see I have already done something there. So you have this property called synapse.commons.json output auto primitive, and by default that is true. For example, if you go down here, you will have all these properties explained. For example, auto primitive property is by default true. So what does that do is, by default, if you see a number, it will you know, in XML you see a number, it will use that as a number type in JSON. And if you don't want that to happen, you can uncomment this, and then obviously you need to restart your server, and let's restart and see what happens first. And now if I send it, you see all of those numbers became a string. But this is also not ideal. Like, you know, it converts everything to a string. But what if you just want this to be a string but not these things? So then obviously this property wouldn't work because it's a global property. So I'm gonna switch that off, and I'm gonna also open this other configuration file called deployment toml, because that's an important file as well. There are few properties that I can add here. So I forgot to tell this one earlier on. So build valid NC name, this particular configuration is important when you do JSON to XML transformation earlier. You remember when JSON had a space, and you know, it came back with some values, like for the space it added JSON reader _32, something like that, and that wouldn't happen unless you have this particular property here in this deployment.toml under the mediation section. So you can, I'll keep it as an exercise. You know, by default this property is not added. So when you do it for the first time, you'll probably see an invalid XML coming back. You know, you will get a response, but it is an invalid XML. So you need to add this particular property to get it sorted. Okay. And so I'm gonna stop this thing, but now my requirement is I only want this to be a this to be in strings, and these are to be in number format. So how do I do that? And that's one way. And yeah, so this is where what we call as this other JSON transform mediator comes in. So as you can see, JSON transform mediator helps do these kind of specialized scenarios where you feed an XML or a JSON, and you also feed a schema along with that and to the JSON transform mediator, and that will come out or spit out another JSON according to that schema, and so forth. So you have to provide the schema there, and there are multiple properties that you can apply as well. So for example, I want this particular number to be, I want this to be an array. I want a book to be an array, even though there is only one. Let's say if I remove this, you see that okay, my API is not started. Let's start it again quickly. And now if I send this, you see this comes as an object and this as a number, but let's say my requirement is this has to be a string, and regardless whether there is only one object or multiple objects, I want this element to be an array. And to do that thing, you have to make use of the JSON transform mediator. For that, we need a JSON schema. I'm not gonna explain to you how to create a JSON schema, but you can add it in your configuration registry or somewhere. You can do that thing. For example, let me close this for a while. Give a little bit of space, and there are some files that you can basically provide here. So I'm going to say JSON file, and resource name is, I'm going to say books schema. Okay, I typed it somewhere else. And artifact name also, I'm going to use the same, and I'm going to save it in a configuration directory, and I can say schemas. All the schemas are going to be part of here, right? And you're going to get a file, and I'm going to have this content. I have already created that content somewhere, so you will easily understand what does that mean here. So you see, I have a type object, and under that there can be a property. I have a books property, and under the books property is an object, and under that you have other properties, and I have a book property, and that book properties type is an array. So basically what it's gonna say is this is going to be an array. And next up, I'm going to also tell I have this total property, and that total property is going to have the type of string, and simple as that. Okay, so I have my API. Go back to my API, and I just want to add this JSON transform mediator here. If I add JSON transform mediator, I can give a schema there and just submit. And unfortunately there is a bug here. You see, when you add the JSON transform mediator in between, it also adds a response mediator on top of it. I need to delete that, and this seems to be a bug. And you just go back, you see it in this form, and you have a JSON transform mediator applied after you set the message type property, and with this particular schema. With this schema, I can now run my mediator here, and it's up and running. And now let's go and run this, and now you see this has become an array. This is still a number, and this has become a string. Likewise, in JSON transform mediator can become very useful, and JSON transform mediator here also you can have other properties as well, like if, for example, you can add multiple properties underneath here, and these are explained in this documentation, for example. So this is a sort of an example that I took, and you can add auto primitive property here rather than in a global file, for example. So then that will only be applicable for this particular transformation. Even then, when you do this thing, the entire numbers will become strings, but when you have the schema applied, and then that will also work in certain circumstances to pinpoint and say what object needs to be where. So this is a very small brief video on the JSON to XML and XML to JSON support that we have in WSO2. And also I just want to quickly wrap up with one more thing. I would like to just stop this thing, and I'm going to remove this part. you can also do, and come back to XML. Now you're gonna get let's say previously I had something. Now how do I read JSON values into properties and things like that? That's also something that we can use. I'll wrap up with that. So to that you can add a property mediator again, and let's say name value, and the expression, you can have an expression. These values are again explained here. For example, I think somewhere maybe somewhere here, yeah, so these kind of things. So if you add $.id, $. Means the entire payload, and then under that you can have ID. So if you want to read this part, you can use $.id, $.name to read the name part, and so forth. So those are the things that you can do. There are other special notations as well. I recommend that you go through that. So we'll do one of that. So $.name, and I want to put it inside the name, and maybe add a log mediator. So I'm adding this log mediator by right, because I know the Synapse syntax, but if you're not, you should be using this low code editor. So let's go back, run this again. Okay, looks like there is an error in my what's my error? Invalid XPath expression. Okay, $.name. So you need to have here in this case you need to have JSON eval added. My bad. You should specifically say JSON eval. And let's run it. But when it comes to a payload mediator arguments, you don't add that JSON eval, right? So okay, I'm gonna say name, David, and you can have other stuff also, like ID. Okay. When you run it, you see the name David is being properly extracted. So these are the kind of things that you have to know when it comes to working with JSON payloads. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to recording more videos like this. So please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button to get notifications, and have a great day.